Hello, everybody. You may have just heard part of the intro twice. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're waiting for Matt to join. We think he may have gotten his time zone transitions a little mixed up. But Blayne and I just wanted to start the show since we saw so many good people joining us. Brought to you by Discord mods. That's good. I mean, we have a brought to you by Tyler, but that's a good one. Like I was saying, though, we're waiting for Matt Pollard to join us. I think he might have gotten his time zone conversions mixed up. Here he comes. Let's see. But yeah, we wanted to start just since we have people joining, wanted to make sure everyone knows. We'll do the social once we get Matt in, and it's all good fun. But wanted to make sure you good people knew that we were coming. Zoom being stupid, that's what his excuse was. I'll take it. I understand Zoom being crazy. He is joining. We'll get him in. We'll get this thing started. There we go. Except now I need to fix some stuff. Hello, sir. How are you?
I frustrated.
It's okay.
The immediate emotion.
Blayne and I are just vamping. It is totally okay. We have some very nice people here in chat.
No, I had it logged. I was logged in on the desktop version, and I was clicking your link, and then it was opening up Zoom in the app rather than via desktop where I prefer to have it with my tabs. But it wasn't I was logged in on desktop, but not on the app when it was loading itself, and then it wasn't actually. I don't know. This is next if Chicharito's hat trick against New York Red Bulls was me when I was traveling for work and the lost audio with the yakety sax that you were going to put on. If that was Chicharito's hat trick, then Chicharito's 90-minute performance and everything that went on was me for the last 15 minutes.
Understand. That is
okay.
That is a difficult situation. Let's see here. I'm getting.
Hi, Blayne.
Hey, Matt.
There we go. Let's fade to our. There we go. Our 3-screen layout. Yes. Welcome to Zoom, Matt. We got some great people from the Patreon here. We've got some great people joining us. I am going to get the social on because we were waiting for Matt to join us before we started to plug this bad boy. I don't know if you can see Matt, but in honor of you, I have my 2015 MLS All-Star jersey on from
I do.
Colorado. I threw that. I don't have a Colorado jersey, so nice, very nice. I raided my parents' closet this weekend to get my kits out of storage. So, I could bring that one out too. I thought about that. I've got that saved to crew.
I will be wearing it semi-ironically this week from a fantasy context. As clearly the players have chosen to act in solidarity by deciding to not collect a point, score a goal, or record a clean sheet in respect of their fans and fantasy owners until they are once again the crew.
Yes, I think that is clearly what's going on. All right, everybody. So sorry for the short delay. I'm just getting our social out. As always, if you are on Twitter, once that should have already gone out. If you're on Twitter, if you would not care to retweet the social media, that would be fantastic to help increase the people who are here to join us tonight for the tips. Some of you all in chat like to be like, Fantasy Ball is trying to monetize his account. That's not happening. Maybe if we got there, but no, that's not happening. This is just to spread the word to all of you wonderful people for fantasy and to have some good conversation and to good ideas.
We won 100 people in chat at one point this season.
That would be great.
Wow.
Yeah, we got close to. I don't know what our chat total. Close to 60. I think that's where we're at. 50.
We've been
55.
mid-50s for sure.
Yeah, we've hit 55 people before, which is awesome. That's fantastic. We have good viewership of the podcast and of the video stream. So thank you so much, everyone. And we're getting there. Okay, so Reddit's out. Twitter is out. We're here with Matt. And you guys got to hear the fun intro there at the beginning. I hope you hear the intro at the beginning. That's my understanding of how that's supposed to happen. But we are going to get started right now. We're going to be talking about round 6, and I'll do the intro for the recording of all of our podcast people. Heckle from Andrew Crawlard. Yes, no, don't worry. I will make sure Matt drops that gem on the actual podcast as well. Some things are just for you good people who join us before the show starts, but we will make sure that happens. So, are you guys ready?
Let's do it.
Here we go. Ooh, I can't forget to record. Ashley would kill me if I got to record, because I usually do, but I got this time. Okay, for real. Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the MLS Fantasy Insider, our preview of round 6. This episode is brought to you by Breck Shea! No. I wish. No, actually, it's brought to you by the amazing Patreon supporters of the MLS Fantasy Insider and MLSFantasyBoss.com. I'm your host, Reid Connolly from MLS Fantasy Boss, and tonight I'm joined by our co-host, Blayne Riffle. Unfortunately, Ashley has friends in town tonight and could not join us, but the brought you by was in her spirit. But have no fear also, because we have a top-notch, high-energy special guest with us tonight. Please welcome back to the show, Matt Pollard from Last Word on Soccer and Holding the High Line Colorado Rapids podcast. How is everyone tonight?
I'm good.
Things are going okay other than my technical difficulties. Do I want to rehash that for everybody who's now joined us live, Reid?
I think you should, but before you do that, those of you who are listening to the podcast, please try to join the live stream or at least watch the beginning of this episode, because Matt just did like a Tejan Day sort of lean away from the microphone and then lean back in so he could breathe. It was pretty, I guess, like epic early 2000s or something. Anyway, yes, Matt, you had some difficulties.
So I was logged in on Zoom on the on my web browser on Google Chrome, because I'm not a heathen who uses Microsoft Edge or anything. And so I was clicking the Zoom link, Reid, that you had just sent via Twitter DMs, and for some reason it was opening up Zoom, the app, but it didn't register that I was already logged in, so I had to re-log in, and then all it did was show that I didn't have any meetings you sent me a link to join the meeting, and it was doing everything with the exception of letting me join the meeting. So in many, many ways, that was similar to my frustrations from this weekend of debating between captaining Montero or Carlos Heel, and then ultimately deciding to go with Rui Diaz because I thought San Jose Earthquakes chaos, it's going to be an absolute goal fest, and it wasn't an absolute goal fest. Unfortunately, I got 0 extra bonus points for one Alex Roldan's save that he had at the end there. I think I would like to petition Reid for a rule change in MLS Fantasy that the minute a field player has to take over in goal, that should immediately be, I'm not saying it should be like 10 points or anything, but that should be a separate bonus just for the lulz.
Oh, I like it, because really we're talking about just a small handful of people. We have Alex Roldan, of course, from this week, and then we have
Mike McGee, Rodrigo Slagle, if we're including playoffs and just in penalties. Well, I mean, Slagle should have gotten like 50 million, like however many points that Dumbledore gave Gryffindor at the end of Sorcerer's Stone is how much Slagle should have gotten for that play. And then I believe Ryan Hollingshead a few years ago for Dallas, perhaps.
Andrew Farrell as well. One of his first or second years in the league, he ended up putting on the gloves and jumping into the goal. So very slick.
1 point for every positive action. You make a save, it's an instant point. Recovery, interception. 1 point for every positive action. Just throw the four.
I mean, that could work. That could give you more than 10. That could give you more than 10. I like this. We should petition for this for next year and whatever other crazy If you are in chat right now, share your other fun crazy fantasy rules that you would like to see. Or if you're listening to us at MLS Fantasy Boss, at MLSFI, or feel free to at LWOS Matt Pollard if you want to actually send it to Matt Pollard and share with him what you think should be a fun fantasy rule addition. But let's just jump right in, guys, into how our weekends went. First, double game week. Matt, you gave us a little preview of your team. If you want to expand upon that, feel free, or if not, I'll just let Brilliant go.
I mean, I kind of went. I think we'll get to this when we get into housekeeping, but I'm probably going to be less focused with the rule change than also how much the schedule congestion generally is taking place. Unless I really like the midweek matchup, the Wednesday matchup, I'm probably not going to be focusing too much on double game weeks going forwards. But had Kai Wagner, had Alex Roldan, was super happy with him after Wednesday night, even though he didn't get the extra points for being in goal, but he got 14 for me. Blayne, you and I both agreed Carlos Heel was a must play as well. And Gonzalo Higuain rescued the night for me. Unfortunately, the person who I played in our head-to-head league for MLS Fantasy Boss completely blew me away on the switcheroos. I had Jonathan Mensah, who had just 4 for the weekend game. Memo Rodriguez had 5 for the game against Kansas City, and I'm probably selling the Cade Cowell stock, at least for right now, personally, folks. So I, as the resident self-appointed king of the land of switcheroos, did not do particularly good. And then I ended up subbing out. McCarthy only got me 3, so then I went with Galese because I had some extra cash to spend on Sunday night and was very happy with that one move that I made in terms of my bench situation.
Blayne, you had a monster week. You're muted.
Lily was in here, so I muted it. So now I'm back. Yeah, I had a 107 this week, week rank 136. Really happy with that. And that includes having McCarthy as my only goalkeeper and getting a 3 off the bench because I decided to roll with both Dahome and Soteldo. And so 107 with those guys in there is huge. I did captain Montiero instead of Heel, but same points both ways. Polito on the bench was huge. I hope everybody listened to me on that one. I know the big debate with Russell and Polito, but I just had that feeling. And then bench hits weren't as great, but the one thing I did make or do really well was I saw the lineups. I didn't like the way Columbus came out, and I dropped Zelarayan for Reynoso at that point. And that was huge. That pretty much saved my week right there. Won me a few of my head-to-heads because they were all pretty close. I think 100 points. If you hit 100 points, you had a monster week, though. That's a good score this week. 90s we saw a lot of 90s. 100 plus, I think, is where you saw some really big moves. I know in Discord today we were seeing a bunch of people saying 100 or more, and they were moving up 50, 60, 100 ranks in the overall.
Yeah, you really needed to hit those triple digits. I had 98 points, so a pretty strong week myself, but I think I might have maybe gone down or stayed about the same. I'm in the 140s. I think I might have been maybe a slightly higher, but I think you definitely needed to have a triple digit, depending on where you are. Caveat right there. Depending on where you are, having a high 90s score would have been fantastic. You probably saw it rises up. If you were in that maybe top 100, 150, you probably needed to hit the triple digits. 100 plus, definitely a fantastic score. I saw some 114s. I think 121 might have been the highest score I saw. I don't know if that was the highest overall. Can't sort like that. I really wish we could. But yeah, some fantastic scores. I had a fantastic time with my defense this week, which is where I oftentimes struggle. I also hadn't had McCarthy. I did not do Carlos Heel, which would have been better than my Nani Otteru that I was going for, but otherwise Reynoso, Morgan, Montiero with the Montiero captain. Had Higuain. I ended up going with Cowell on the bench, just trying to see if there was any kind of cheap magic I could get from San Jose. I did have Polito at one point, but I swapped him for Rui Diaz, and that did not work as I had hoped. But yeah, no, I can't complain. 98, a great score this week. The average was 68.3, but we know we have some inactive teams, so don't worry about that. Yeah, my overall rank now was 148, and I just checked. I went up by 1.3 million, so I'm sitting at 113.9. So for those of you who are kind of trying to figure out where you are, I'm a little bit behind the value game, I would think. So if you're sitting at around, Andrew, correct this, 123 was the highest. So I was close. 123 was the highest for this round. But if you're sitting around, I'd say 115, you're probably doing pretty competitively with the value gains. Higher than that, you're doing awesome. But that's a good score. I'm finding it pretty easy at this point to work in a lot of the guys that I want. So if you're sitting around there, I think, and you're not in that top 100 trying to get into the Champions League at the end of the season, I think you're going to be in a good spot going into the second quarter of the season to come out strong and really be able to field a good team. Ashley did send in her score. She got 84 points, dropped a little bit, but she gained 1.8 million.
to that point, Reid, as well, I had 89 on this week, and I think I was 164 last week, and so I dropped all the way down to 257, which is the lowest I've been as of any week. I don't think I've been below the top 200 prior to this week ending. So I think that really pointed out like I was doing really, really well, and then a bad week just because my bench didn't come through, and then anybody who gets, over 100 at that point probably jumped me, who was roughly level with me. So, and then I think I'm slightly higher than you on valuation. I think I'm at 114.1. A lot of that has come in the last couple of weeks as I've kind of ridden the rise of Sam Vines, who I did not have, ironically, on my team for this week, but obviously it had a couple clean sheets and then also a couple assists as well. So that value game is I'm sure we've talked about this in the past, Reid, but just do I want points right now, or do I want to add value that's going to make it really, really easy once hyperinflation starts to kick in for some of the more expensive players? We're probably at the point now where that's going to stop being an issue. Like you've either risen in value or you've got time to catch up, folks, but this is always that weird inflection point. And I think once you get to about 115 on your total value team, you probably don't have to worry about that too much.
Yeah, the first quarter ends for round 7, so we only have 2 more rounds left in this first fantasy qualifier quarter. So if you're pretty far back from the top 100, you could definitely still focus on value building. But I agree with Matt. If you're sitting around this mid-teens mark, you're probably going to be pretty strong going into the second qualifier, and you have a lot of information now to build upon for who's on form and who's kind of hot and which teams are on the slump. So, but if you're still building, if you still want to focus on building because you know you're not going to make that top 100, yeah, definitely still look for some building your value going into round 8 in a few weeks for the beginning of quarter 2. Let's get to some quick takeaways. I'm going to do this one first because Matt, again, has a great little dollop of a comment to go with this. I think one of the biggest disappointments for me this round, even though I kind of expected it, or I was wary of it, and so I did not have any Columbus players in my team. But still, Columbus ended up with no goals and no clean sheets. What? That was crazy. I know I was concerned some about how the rotation would happen. I thought they would field a stronger team against New England. That's why I wasn't high on Heel. Was surprised, though, by the Toronto result. And Matt, you are wearing your Save the Crew scarf. I, too, have one in the background there. You have a comment, though, about how you wish to wear that scarf tonight.
So I guess I'm wearing it in the context of save them from a fantasy standpoint, in addition to what I think is now hashtag Save the Crew 2, or I have seen Columbus Crew Twitter using hashtag We Are the Crew. I'm not sure which one of those might be playing a jab at the recent rebrand, but I'm referring to them in the context from a fantasy standpoint. I had Lucas Zellaran. He got me 4 points. That was okay, but I was hoping for a bump up when they played in the second game. He doesn't even play in the second game. The team hasn't kept a clean sheet. Giassi Zardes hasn't played well. There's so many, at least on paper at the start of the season, that we thought were going to be fantastic from a fantasy standpoint, whether it was Room in goal, Jonathan Mensah, Harrison Afful going forward and creating offensive stuff. Obviously, Zardes, Pedro Santos, and Zellaran doing things offensively, and they haven't really kicked in. And I'm starting to, we'll see what happens this week. They've got a tough game against NYCFC. I think this team needs that Nations League reset, but I'm curious in general, are they the team that's ultimately going to have their season derailed by CCL? Because we see that every single year. Toronto a couple years ago, I can't remember who was it last year. Granted, CCL was very different last year, and 2020 in general derailed things. But I'm hoping that's not the case for the sake of Columbus and the narrative around that team, and certainly for my fantasy team, I'm hoping that's not the case. So hashtag Resurrect the Crew maybe is the more appropriate one to say.
Yeah, there we go. And for those of you who may be wondering, maybe listening to us for the first time, we're not really going to dig into the crew information because this is a fantasy podcast. There's plenty of that out there. We have our opinions, but that's all we'll say about Save the Crew. Some other general fantasy takeaways I'm going to throw out there, and I'll also mention Ashley. She gave us some talking points today. I will say the Austin defense is starting to look maybe more about like what we expected for an expansion team on a long road run. They've dropped points they've dropped a lot of, not points, so they've lost points too, but they've dropped a lot of shots on goal. They've allowed shots on goal a lot in these last couple of games. I think it's about 20 shots per game average of what's been going on. That's that's sort of what we expect on this expansion team. On the, like I said, on the long road, coming up against Nashville could be interesting, but a little bit of cooling from the opening of the season. Someone who is, I don't know, lukewarm from the opening of the season, FC Cincinnati's Acosta. He's back in the mix, got a decent fantasy score of 7 points, and then Cincinnati lost the game at the very end, which, I mean, yeah, of course. I got those updates on my phone and because I was not able to watch the game, and I was like, that's not going to last, and then it didn't, and I knew it. No, but that's something to keep an eye on. Acosta back in the mix for FC Cincinnati does change the attack some. Could potentially be a switcheroo target if you're looking there. I forgot to add into my notes, but I also wanted to mention that Minnesota also scored 1 goal in each of their 2 games and got a 1-0 victory. Maybe not what we had hoped would happen. The Dallas game, I think that made more sense. Maybe hoping more from the Vancouver game, but better than what they had been doing. But still, I think there's some question marks about Minnesota. They're off next round, so we're going to talk more about them next week on the show. From Ashley, she wanted to reiterate what Panda said last week about Carles Heel in at number 10, and he absolutely crushed it when he's in that spot. So when he is in at number 10, totally agree. He is one of the must-have players for fantasy. When he's out on the wing, not so much, really, for that fantasy production. Ashley wanted to mention that Seattle's new, quote-unquote, keeper, Cleveland, is a budget buy at 4.4, though there's some promising things about Fry, so keep an eye on what that will be going forward, if he's going to be sitting out or if he's going to be resting. All I've heard, and you can mention this, Blayne, in your update, is it's not as bad as they thought. So just keep an eye on who's going to be there for Seattle. And as we said at the top of the show, Breck Shea in Miami, attacking as a winger role rules. So yes, Ashley is a huge Breck Shea fan, and inconsistency, I would say, some, but definitely got some points for people. Blayne, what do you have? Takeaways? You're muted again.
Sorry, Lily has been in here all night tonight. I'm actually wearing pink tonight for people on the podcast. You can't see it, but yeah, in honor of Breck Shea, I've grabbed him in draft because Ashley's always talking about him, and I've been a big fan too. And he won me my draft game. So Breck Shea starting on the wing is definitely somebody to keep an eye on. Out of position defender can get you a lot of points real easy. Double game week forwards came through huge this week. And we saw that around 2 chances to score a goal to get that 7-8 points that you want. Or in the case of Higuain and Polito, 2 chances to score 2 goals in a game. Can get some monster scores. If you're a guy that likes to play midfielders all the time, looking at forwards on double game weeks may be more beneficial overall. Your top scores were coming from there rather than midfield this week. And there were some heavy-hitting midfielders that had good weeks, but just when forwards get that many chances to shoot, they get that much more opportunity to score big points. And it really paid off going heavy forwards this week. So keep that in mind on this new double game week scoring going forward. DC's game was interesting. I enjoyed that one. Areola is back from his injury. Huge boost for the team there, but they were showing a lot more aggression going forward, and that's a good thing. I don't think they're going to be that pushover team we've had all season to start now. I think they're going to start finding a way to score some goals, and just you got to kind of watch out for that. Sporting is still in limbo with everything going on, but Zusi being in the lineup is a team it really makes them an offensive threat. He's just been so much better than Jalen Lindsay going forward. And Ilie is playing as a center back. If you're seeing his scores go up, he's been playing there these last couple of games and seems to be doing really well, but that's one less clean sheet opportunity for the rest of the team. Was really surprised by Montreal this week on the double game week. They really showed up. I think they're legit. They're not the team where you can probably count on people, but I think they're going to beat a lot of teams, and that defense is stronger than I think anybody really expected. And then finally, San Jose didn't score a goal in the double game week. That's scary when you've got Cowell, who's been so strong. You've got Wando coming off the bench. This was a team that seemed to be just firing on all cylinders, and then just nothing for a whole week. So if you went in on them this week, it probably hurt quite a bit. But San Jose is one of those teams. I don't know how much you can rely on them going forward, given how bad they were for these 2 games.
Matt, your fantasy takeaways from this round?
I think, in years past, Reid, I would say you absolutely have to go all in on double game weeks. If there's if there's four teams playing midweek that are also playing on the weekend, I would have a starting 11 of, unless I was doing switcheroos, of 11 players on those 8 teams that were playing in the double game week. But as I was kind of alluded to earlier, there was a lot of fixture congestion last year. Last year was really, really weird. There's going to be large gaps in between for games. I know there's a bunch of teams that going into, I think in October, there's a bunch of teams that have like 5 games over the stretch of like 16 days. I know the Rapids are one of those teams. So I think we're going to see a lot more rotation. And so in that, if you have a guy that isn't starting in that first Wednesday game, he's basically a 1-game player because, like Brad Smith was that example. That's why I switched out for Alex Rodon last Wednesday. And so I'm less bullish on those, particularly if you have a guy who starts on Wednesday and the Wednesday game doesn't necessarily go well. We saw a lot of teams that played midweek struggle. That Columbus New England game was an absolute slog with 2 teams who had played midweek and kind of had a rough go of it. And then in situations where teams played on the midweek and then played a team that didn't, typically they really, really struggled. Houston made a bunch of changes. I was at that game in the press box at DSG, and the Rapids were absolutely swarming over them for 30 minutes. So I'm probably going to be less bullish on DGWs going forward. I was kind of already thinking that, but I wanted to see how this week happened, how this round happened before I actually go forward with that. But I mean, if it's a team, even if I like them on like 2 away games in a DGW, I'm probably going to be avoiding them unless it's like Carlos Heel or, Carlos Vela if he's back to being fully fit and healthy. And I'm probably going to lean more on home teams. And then for my switcheroos or other people who I sub out, I'm going to see how bad the double game week team does midweek and then how they rotate their squad on the weekend, and then look for players who will take advantage of that going forward, which means more work and more interesting, but also kind of frustrating because normally I like to just have my lineup set for Wednesday, get a bunch of points, and then not have to think about fantasy because everybody's already logged.
Yeah, that's a great point about the double game week for those of you who are wondering how to navigate this going forward. This was one of the least congested double game weeks that we have. I mean, we have one coming up that only has 3 teams. We have another one coming up with only 1 team, and then the last round of the year has 4, maybe 6 or 7 teams. But most of our double game weeks this year are going to be everybody. Everybody is playing a double game week. So it's going to be massive amounts of double game weeks. Expect high rotation. Expect just all sorts of unexpected because MLS craziness. And I think you're right, Matt. When everybody is on a double game week, it's hard to not have a team that's on a double game week. But it does make you question what's going to happen. And it makes, I know you said you're king of the switcheroos, it makes those hard. Switcheroos were difficult this round, and so that's why I opted to just use an auto-roo. And as we explained last week, that's just letting MLS take care of its substitutions on its own. That's not doing the switcheroo, the key switcheroo mechanic of forcing the substitution. That's the main difference between the switcheroo and the auto-roo. And it makes it really tough to get these things lined up. You can still do it, but it does take micromanagement that we know not a lot of players, maybe that's not fair. We know not every player is interested in or finds fun about the game. And so you can definitely do it. But yeah, the double game weeks are massive this week. If you don't know when they are, head over to MLSFantasyBoss.com. At the top of the page in the bar, there is a link for game chart and primer. It is right there. You can click on it. It is you can expand the picture. It has the double game weeks. It has the bye rounds, and it has a little color-coded chart for if the games start on a weekend, a Thursday midweek start, or a Wednesday midweek start. At least I think it's Thursday. Maybe it's, I said T. I probably meant R. I'll have to double check that, but check it out. It's in there. So our next double game week is coming up in round 9, so we have some time before that happens. All right, guys, that was good. A good wrap up. This is recovery. This is DGW recovery. Trying to catch our breath from all of this and move forward. So we're now going to talk about our next segment, the housekeeping segment. Okay, got my social out there. Fantastic. Housekeeping. First, congratulations to all of the league winners. I'm going to say for the MLS Fantasy Boss, the Reddit, and the Discord Classic Leagues, Lee is leading with 490 points. I want to point out the last, maybe every round so far, one person has been leading in those 3 leagues at the same time. The way my rules work is if you win multiple, if you qualify to win, so you get first place in all of my leagues, you can only win it once. So I will start going down the rankings at the end of the season when we're handing out prizes. So don't feel like you're out of the running yet. If you're winning in multiple leagues, you can only get the top prize and only get it once. So there's plenty of gift cards to go around. I'm going to give a shout out to Shannon of Ted Lasso's Biscuits over at the Patreon Open, who has held on to the league lead right now with 472 points. Very nice. And then the head-to-heads, the Discord league, there is an 11-way tie at 5-0-0, so one team dropped off there. Over at the Patreon league, Bartles of Squirtle FC, Squirrel Squad, I believe. I think it's Tyler Bartles, one of our longtime supporters, former contributor as well, is winning their 4-1-0, the only league we have with a team not on 5-0-0 as a leader. And then over at the MLS Fantasy Insider Invitational, Skylar Redpath is the only remaining undefeated team still as well with 5-0-0. However, I will say that at one point, Matt Pollard was tied with him, and I was not diligent at getting him on the show at that time to be able to brag about his success. My apologies, sir.
All good.
But Matt is still, you might be second, is that right? I think I'm third in that one. But you're right there.
Yes.
You're close. You're really close in that one. So very, very tough right there. But congratulations to everyone for how well you are all doing. As far as the rounds start this week, you get a little bit of a breather. We're not starting on Wednesday. Games start Saturday, May 22nd at 1 o'clock p.m. With Montreal versus my FC Cincinnati. So that'll be a good matchup. I'm really looking forward to that game. Preview of what's to come. I'm really looking forward to that game to see how that works out. I'll probably lose, but I'm interested. No teams are on a double game week, as I already mentioned, and one team is on a bye week, which is Minnesota, as I also already mentioned. So if you are looking for switcheroo options, you want Minnesota players, you should easily have 3 Minnesota players. You have plenty of options at all those positions to get a 4.0 scrub sub player for your switcheroo team. And Blayne, I know we had a bunch of new people joining the Discord this week. Head over MLSFantasyBoss.com/Discord to find out how to do that. And a lot of people were asking about the injuries, suspensions, and Discord mega call-up reference sheet. So give us a bit of a preview from that and remind people of how they can view that document when they join Discord.
Yeah, join Discord, and we've got a pinned post up there for the fantasy mega reference. Or just message somebody in chat and say, hey, how do I find this? And they'll help you. Ranchinator over there today was helping out, updating everything that we got from today, because we actually got kind of a massive data dump today on injury updates and everything. And we updated the sheet, got everything from the weekend that we knew of in, and got some good news to start off. Carlos Vela did play, subbed in. Don't know how quickly they're going to try to return him to the starting lineup, but he is back and playing. Josie Altidore got a start, which is big. Tim Melia got a start for the second game, which really looked good. And then Paul Arriola is back and starting for DC. So some major returns there. Some starters that were pretty much locked in without injuries are coming back. But we've also got some bad news. This was a huge week for injuries. Jordi Delem tore his ACL and is out for the season. Aaron Long ruptured his Achilles and is also out. And then we've also got Jeff Attinella has a hip injury that's going to be season-ending as well. So that's 3 guys in one weekend. Thoughts go out to those guys because that's rough. All 3 of those are pretty serious. With the Attinella injury, that leads us to just a whole string of goalkeeper issues we're having this year. Attinella was filling in for Steve Clark, and Clark is still out. They signed a new guy, Ketterer, who's coming in. He got a clean sheet this week, so we'll have to see. I don't know what his price is going to be, and he'll be added to the game. Maurer for Dallas is still hit or miss. We don't know when he's going to be back. His backup has stayed fairly cheap. Stephen Fry is another big one. He's out, I think 4 to 6 weeks is the best estimate we've got so far. His backup looked pretty good, though. And then we've got a whole lot of positions that are contested right now, so I wanted to highlight those. Diop has been starting for Montreal, but Pantemis got the start this week for the double game week, and that's interesting to watch. Montreal's got some potential good matchups coming up, and their defense looks good. So if you're going to go Montreal, keep an eye on that. Tyler Miller has been put back in goal for Minnesota over Dane St. Clair, and they've looked better with him back there. St. Clair's younger, looked better at the end of last year, so watch that. That may be a battle that starts. Kenneth Vermeer, formerly of LAFC, started with FC Cincinnati. I don't know what the plan is there, if Teton's going to be out for a while, if they're going to try both of them, or if he's there. And then Chris Seitz has started for DC in place of Bill Hamid, but John Kempen got both starts on the double game week. I didn't hear if there was an injury to Seitz, but that's a lot of goalkeeper rotation. So don't just pick these guys thinking, oh, yeah, it's a goalkeeper, they're always going to start. We're seeing a lot of rotation there right now in a lot of teams. Tyler in chat is saying Diop is starting Saturday. Or started Saturday. Pantemis was the midweek. There may be some rotation on the double game weeks there. Just keep an eye on that one. And then we've got some other pretty interesting injuries. Ezekiel Barco for Atlanta has missed a couple of games. I don't think I had him on there last week. Andrew Gutman for New York Red Bulls has had a great start to the season, but I'm hearing he's unlikely. I think he missed the game last week and just potentially there. Johnny Russell came off early with a pretty serious injury or knee injury, leg injury. Couldn't continue and was noticeably slower when he picked that up. No timeline there. Ramel Kyoto for Montreal was stretchered off. There's some speculation that was more time wasting than actual serious need of a stretcher, but he was stretchered off. And then for Nashville, because they've got a pretty good game coming up this week, Cadiz and Mukhtar have not been starting for them. CJ Sapong has filled in, and then they've kind of rotated through the midfield a little bit. But that's two prominent players that we've liked going forward that have not been starting the last couple of games, so keep an eye on that. And Reid, I think that's all the highlights we had from this week. Thanks to our Discord community for helping get this updated today. We had a lot of data dumps and a lot of people throwing out names for our admins to update.
Fantastic. Anything you want to add, Matt?
Breaking news, I guess, Reid. There's just a joint statement put out by Columbus on Twitter saying that they had a meeting with a Nordeca, and it looks like the crest is going to be altered, and they're going to be adding crew into the outline of the Ohio flag, as well as 9-6 in there somewhere. And so it ended with the crew and the Nordec are excited to move forward together. So I guess I can take my scarf off now because, Reid, we saved the crew!
Again! We saved them again! I'll buy another scarf. Let's do it, guys.
But now we need hashtag Save the Crew 3 for the actual fantasy implications of the team.
Right. The return of the crew, the crew strikes back, pre-court strikes back. No, they can't do that. There's a Star Wars reference there that I'm missing. So
I guess the only thing that I'd really add, I don't have anything to add from a injury standpoint. You were pretty comprehensive there, Blayne. But I guess the one thing that I would add, Sam Vines was hurt for Colorado to start the season. He had a little bit of a hamstring issue. He's gone 90 minutes in the 2 games since, and the one thing that Robin Fraser wanted to see from him after his debut was to actually contribute offensively. He's had an assist from a fantasy standpoint, creating a chance. He didn't get an assist on the Cole Bassett goal against Minnesota, and then he had the goal, obviously, the other night against Houston. So from a security of, is this guy going to be okay, Sam Vines is certainly a much more certainty from a 90-minute standpoint than, say, a Carlos Vela is right now.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to what I know all of you all have come here for. Besides our amazing banter tonight, you are here for our current round picks. Okay, current round picks. Let's start with most promising games. Matt, which games are you most looking forward to from a fantasy point of view?
I'm looking at New York Red Bulls against New England Revolution. I think New England had to figure some things out. For my money, they should have won the game against Philly. Obviously, they figured it out against Columbus on the weekend. They were the much better team through that stretch. Full week worth of time to train and rest up from that standpoint, even though Red Bulls obviously didn't have a midweek game this past week, and now they're playing at home again. So Carlos Gil is a lock for me. I'm not sure that I'd be betting on either of these teams. If anything, it'd probably be New England to get a clean sheet, but Carlos Gil, Clark, there's multiple good attacking fullbacks that you could have in this. I'd be looking at the strikers, more so maybe Gustavo Bo, but I think there's a number of really good options. If you're starting your lineup, folks, and you don't have that, Carlos Gil aside, if you don't have at least one other player from this matchup, I have to question what you're thinking from a fantasy standpoint. And then similarly, I think there'll be a lot of goals, not a whole lot of defense, lots of options in the midfield, and definitely at the striker position. Chicago versus Inter Miami. Higuain gets off the snide and everything. Chicago Fire have yet to win a game. I think they're going to come out with a you-know-what. They're going to come out with a fire under their you-know-what. If nothing else, Robert Barrick is a decent option to think about from a goal-scoring standpoint, and I think Miami's figured it out, at least offensively for now, Breck Shea included.
Ooh. Yeah, no, that's a really good one. I'm interested in that one as well. Chicago was really, they've had some decent fantasy cheap options that you could throw on your bench and just see what happens. And so, yeah, this is a really interesting game for them from a fantasy point of view to see what you could make happen. And the Red Bulls have had one of the better defenses, and so they're on the road against some of these must-have fantasy players. I mean, Bai has been amazing as well for a lot of fantasy managers this year as well. So, yeah, two fantastic ones. Blayne, I know you've taken one that I also liked, but what games do you like?
Yeah, I think New England's your must-watch game for points. Red Bulls without Aaron Long now. Andrew Gutman's probably out. Like, that's your huge one for points that I see. But I'm really looking at this week. This week was tough when I was filling out my roster and everything. I feel like this is more of a measuring stick week, for lack of a better term for it. There's a lot of interesting games to see where I don't see a lot of, like, heavy one-sided games where you can really go in and bank on a lot of points. I see a lot of games where you can speculate and potentially come up huge. Don't know what's going to happen. And so I've got two games highlighted that I like for some potential points and some fireworks. And one of those is Montreal versus FC Cincinnati. Lucho's back. Lucho looks good, makes the team look so much better. This is not a team to hunt against for clean sheets. And I think you're not going to see quite as many goals against Cincinnati when they've got the full team out there. I just think they're going to boss the midfield a little bit more. They're not going to get overrun and concede 20, 30 shots a game. They may get that down to 10 to 15 shots a game. And I just don't think people are going to rack up the score. But Montreal's one of those wild card teams that I think we're all still underestimating them to a little bit, to a degree. And I think they can go out and get a big win. But I don't think this is a team where you're just going to say, oh, go all in against FC Cincinnati right now. And so that's a game I really want to see, because I want to see how good Montreal is. If they're as good as we think, they should come in, since it's a home game, and really do a number on Cincinnati. But I think if Lucho's as good as advertised and brings up Cincinnati, like, it's just, I want to see that game. That's must-watch TV for me. And then the other one I've got is DC versus Philly. Philly's on the road. They've good squad. I think they can go in and get a lot of points. But DC's a team that's been steadily improving all season. They're getting some pieces back. I don't know that this is the game. You give me this game second week of the season, yeah, I say three guys deep on Philly. Go for it. This is going to be a 2-0, 3-0 win. But now I think DC might be able to even pick out or snag a win or a draw at home on this one. Just going to be a fun game to watch. And I do see some fantasy points here. I just don't know where they're going to come from yet.
Yeah, games that I was looking at, and Ashley sent in some. Portland versus LA. Definitely some interesting options there. What's going to happen with Valeri, one of our past Mr. Fantasies go-to? Like, this is, LA has been horrible on defense and so leaky. Is this a time for a Valeri to come out and shine at a fantastic value mark? Orlando versus Toronto. We saw some life from Toronto last week. Orlando has been doing some good things for sure. Had some great stuff from Pereira as well. That's one Ashley liked. She also liked New York City FC versus Columbus, just piling on the unfortunate hate that's happened to Columbus from a fantasy point of view. And then I'm going to echo Montreal versus FC Cincinnati. Yeah, there's lots of good things happening in Montreal, and FC Cincinnati has shown that it will allow opportunities, and Montreal can make that happen. So some good value options there as well. And I'm going to echo again Miami, just to pound on. They gave up 2 points 2 goals to Cincinnati. So again, Chicago, what can they do with that? That doesn't say a lot when you're letting FC Cincinnati drop a couple of them on you. So definitely something to keep in mind when you're looking at those games from fantasy. Let's move on to our keepers, defenders, and clean sheet chances. Blayne, who do you like?
Yeah, I struggled this week, but then I put a whole lot of clean sheet with names down. I think there's potential in these teams. I'm afraid of a freak goal blowing up my clean sheets here. But I have Montreal, Seattle, Nashville, New England, New York City, and Dallas, all as kind of my clean sheet watch. But outside of Seattle and possibly Nashville, I'm a little more hesitant to say that that I'm going to go, yeah, these teams are clean sheet chances. There's good possibility, but it's not there. For goalkeeper, Pantemis or Diop, whoever starts for Montreal, is in the first part of a switcheroo. And then I'm going to one of my clean sheet teams. It'll probably be Cleveland for Seattle because he is so cheap. Chat said that Maurer was on the bench for Dallas, so he may be coming back sooner rather than later. So I don't know that I want to spend the money there or get caught out on that one. So it'll probably be Cleveland. Maybe Willis for Nashville, but he's so expensive. Cleveland's a cheap option to go to. And then on defense, I actually had some extra money when I put my team together. So I went with a guy like Bai, who's getting bonus points for New England. Hollingshead, who gets forward for Dallas. Smith is the highest scoring player in the game, I think, still. And then Lovitz for Nashville is another one that he gets forward contributes a lot. I think this is a week where you can splurge and get some more expensive defenders to get some bonus points. So that's why I have those 4 names right there.
Yeah, no, makes total sense. Let's see here. Matt, who are you looking at?
So Reid, I guess I have a question here. Based on the rankings on how we're doing it for this year, is it what we think like our top options are, or how we're actually setting up our team? Because if I were to pick the top 5 defenders I would put in, I'd be spending easily 35 mil on just defenders. So the point of clarification, since this is my first time on the pod this year.
So I am going to give you the vague, foggy gray answer for that and say it's whatever you want it to be. You can give your actual lineup. You can give just the players who you like. You could even try to go with some differentials based on what Blayne might have already said. It's whatever you think will provide the best advice or get those options out there for fantasy. Oftentimes I will go with who I'm actually looking at or who I am juggling. That's my personal one, is who is on my team or the ones that I'm sort of tossing up as potential swaps. But you could just go with your top 5 and see what happens.
Okay, then. So I'll be going with some value picks to bring some Wall Street bets here to MLS Fantasy Boss. So first of all, I'll echo what Ashley said, I think last week or maybe 2 weeks ago on the show. Blayne, I want to pose a question. Is Brad Smith the first fullback Mr. MLS Fantasy we've had since Graham Zusi?
I think since Graham Zusi, yes. I would say so. I don't think we've had a defender that's been this prominent for this long as a fullback.
Portland, who played was out of position as a defender, but was
Rodney Wallace.
Yes,
Rodney
Wallace. Does that count since he was out of position?
That was pre-Zusi, though.
That's also it's metagaming because he was out of position.
Fair. Sorry.
Okay.
The deep pull.
Okay. Brad Smith is an absolute lock. You have to have him on your team right now. For the purposes of listing my top options, Reid, I put Wagner. I'm probably going to go with a Philly defender. It's probably not going to be him. I actually like Philly defensively from a clean sheet standpoint this week, not as much as I like Seattle or Nashville. I guess the key thing for me is, given what Philly was able to do and the progress that they built over the course of last week with the double game week, and the fact that I'm not even sure, are they flying to DC? We think about it like it's an away game and then like same day travel in the COVID era of MLS. But like, if they all test negative, like, aren't they just getting on a bus and then just not stopping for the 2 hours down from Philly? So I consider that one of the most benign road trips that you could have in MLS. So I'm not too worried about that. So I'll probably go with a Philly defender. Right now I have Glesnick, but if you want a better option, like Blayne was saying, where let's go for a clean sheet, a player on a clean sheet team who we know will get us bonus points. Wagner's your option there on Philly's end. On that same note, another lock that I have for this week is Anton Tinnerholm. Even if Columbus is going to be able to score a goal at Red Bull Arena, I have to imagine that Tinnerholm is going to have his way offensively on the flank. And then I'm looking at Brandon Bye. If there's any defender that I want out of that New York Red Bulls game, it is going to be him. Right now, I have Pulskamp in at goal. I think a switch got flipped for Sporting Kansas City on the weekend against Vancouver. So I like him as a Chiefs goalkeeper. And if that doesn't end up working out, I'm probably going to find a way to switcheroo to Joe Willis. But like Blayne was saying, we're now at the point where, like, going back to my Wall Street Bets joke of, like, hyperinflation is starting to pick in. And now I think it's a legitimate question, unless I'm picking a guy who I have confidence in to get a clean sheet, is it worth spending more than 7.5 mil on a defender or on a goalkeeper? And so that's where this is one of the ones where, would I rather have, the cheapest starter on a good clean sheet team than a guy who I know is going to get us bonus points? And that's where I think, to Blayne's point, is kind of where my concern is from a Nashville standpoint, given I think that Austin's going to be much better this week with Alexander Ring back in.
Andrew Crawlard mentions Gressel as a potential former Mr. Fantasy as fullback. The only thing I asked about that was a lot of his value because he was serving balls to Joseph, who could just put something in his sleep, or was it really him? And maybe that's just part of being Mr. Fantasy, is because you have someone to throw to. But definitely someone to throw if we have. Maybe somebody mentioned Mount Rushmore. Maybe we need a return to the Mount Rushmore for some more considerations.
I think Brad Smith, get the most points of a defender in MLS Fantasy this year, and then I think we'll go back to it. I guess the thing that I would argue to that point, Reid, is that unless Sporting Kansas City was giving up 4 goals in a game, which would have been -2 at that point for Zusi, that Zusi was going to do his thing regardless of what anybody else was doing. I'm not sure we could have said the same thing for Julian Gressel for more than several months at a time. And I mean, right now, like, Brad Smith is the left wing back for Seattle Sounders in the same way that Alphonso Davies is on paper the left back for Bayern Munich, but really is acting as a left winger. Brad Smith is creating offense regardless of what Raul Ruiz Diaz is doing, in the same way that Graham Zusi was effective regardless of whether or not it was Kai Kamara or who was the Argentine DP who they had was a bust, or what's going on at the center forward position had not inhibited Graham Zusi's Mr. Fantasy-ness.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
We missed our one, and I just had it, and I'm losing it again. We had another Mr. Fantasy at the fullback position. No, what you're saying, that Brad Smith is just putting up the points consistently there. Oh, who was it? There's a left side fullback. I just had it and lost it. But no, to the Gressel point, Gressel's been listed as a midfielder in the game way too much. It's hard to call him a Mr. Fantasy at fullback when he's there, because he's playing he's been a midfielder. He's a midfielder this year for DC. I think he was listed as a midfielder for Atlanta the whole time and just played out of position back.
But wait, was he never listed as a defender? Because I thought his rookie year he was listed as a
I'm pretty
defender.
sure he was.
He may have 1 year.
Yeah. No, he definitely was that one time. Let's not spiral too far down, because we could definitely have a whole secondary show about this. Ashley sends over her thoughts as far as defense goes. She likes Seattle, Nashville, and Houston. I agree with 2/3 of that. Houston, not so sure. I believe the pick for that is more against Vancouver than pro Houston. You could roll a dice. That would probably definitely be a switcheroo option. For me, myself, I like Seattle. I like Nashville. I think the go-to keeper for almost everyone this week will be Cleveland. There'll be some kind of Cleveland keeperoo this week. It just makes sense with the 4.0 keeper he's not 4.0. He's sub 5 keeper. He is going to likely start. Don't know how long, but that's the obvious, I think, keeperoo option. I mean, honestly, and I haven't really done this, I usually double up one keeper, one defender, but you could go double Seattle on your defense with Roldan and with Smith. You could even match that up with double Nashville. Again, Austin having some troubles. the thing that scares me is that both of those games are the end of the week. Nashville, there's no place else to pivot. But I think you could
Philly.
Right. That's right. Those final
Wait,
games.
no, Nashville's the final game of the week, aren't they?
They're the
They
final
are.
game. Philly is the second to last game. So you
Okay,
could pivot
so-
with Seattle if you had some stuff with Philly.
I wouldn't double up on Nashville then, folks.
I wouldn't double up them at all. I'm just saying, like, there's a crazy thing you could potentially do. I think Romney's at least maybe a good call for that. He's one of the cheaper ways into it. I like that a lot. But otherwise, I like some of the options you guys have picked. Going more of the offensive route with defense, I think, has been more successful this year, with clean sheets being fewer and far between. But I could see going light on defense, maybe even just going 3 players and saying, forget it. I want to use my defenders as my switcheroos and try to get more bang for your buck out of potential forwards and midfielders with some. I think those are better options this week. So for me, I'm probably looking at going light on my defense, maybe doubling up with Seattle, and then going with some of the names you've said. I mean, Tinnerholm would be a great option. Could try to capitalize on the weaknesses of Columbus. You could go with a Montreal if you think they could do something against Cincinnati. I don't know, that would be one of those roll the dice ones, kind of like Houston. But you guys have thrown out some good names, I think, for people to consider.
Reid, you're gonna feel stupid because I remembered my Mr. Fantasy for fullback finally, and when I say the name, everybody's gonna groan because you should know it, and I even said the name
Madronda.
already and I forgot it. Ryan Hollingshead.
Oh yeah, Hollingshead.
Yeah, that's
He plays everywhere. Yeah, he's another good one.
And I feel stupid for forgetting it. I even said his name as one of my player picks this week.
Well, let's move on to midfield and forget it. Matt, who do you like at midfield?
Carlos Heel, if there's anybody who's Mr. Fantasy in this first quarter of the fantasy season, it's going to be him. I also really, really like Nani, especially. I don't know what we're going to get out of Toronto right now, at least certainly from an offensive standpoint, because they just signed Don Dwyer. They subbed out both Josie and Iowa Canola on the weekend game, but I'm not entirely sure about that. What I know is they haven't reforced that back line. I don't think Kamar Lawrence is going to be troubling Nani too much, and he scores bangers at home regardless of what anybody else is doing. So I have him. I really like Madronda, and at 8.9 mil, he's a really, really decent value that you have. And the last two that I have Montero, but put an asterisk on this one, Reid. I think if he starts in the number 10 role, so I guess if Philly's going with the diamond and then the 2 up top, I think the mobility that they're going to have against a relatively flat midfield for DC United is going to be advantageous for him in terms of chance creation and bonuses. And then I'm probably setting up, like you, Reid, I've been liking the 5 midfielders and then have 1 forward, 1 defender, or 2 defenders as my switcheroo options with the bye week. So I'm probably going to have Colin Clark in there from New York Red Bulls, especially if Struber goes with the 4-man midfield and then Clark's paired with Maya. Then I think that's the one thing that I think could prevent me going with bye for a clean sheet for New England would be a Maya and Clark playing close together.
There we go. Blayne, who do you like in midfield?
Yeah, Carlos Heel's the obvious choice this week. I think he's going to be a must-own. I think anybody who's talking fantasy is going to say that. But behind him, it gets a little more wide open. I like Atuesta against Colorado. I think there's potential there. Vela or no Vela, I really think Atuesta can get some points there. I think he's pretty consistent. It's a home game. He didn't have such a great week last week, so that's making me second guess a little bit. But I'm kind of going to roll with him. I like Christian Roldan this week. It's the home game. He's got the points. João Paulo and Ladero are your 2 names that you always kind of gravitate towards, but Roldan's been looking so much better this year. A couple years ago, he was one of those fantasy players that you really wanted to keep an eye on. If you couldn't afford Ladero, you rolled to him. Last year, if you couldn't afford Ladero, you were either taking João Paulo or you weren't taking anybody else. I think Roldan's viable again. And I think he's honestly might have a little bit higher ceiling than Paulo on the right week. And I think this might be one of those weeks. And then the fourth one I've got on my field to start with is Medina for New York City. Quietly putting up a monster season, really involved, and showing why he was a former DP player. And I'm seeing a lot of his name in chat too, so I'm not alone in thinking that right now. I think Medina is a wise call this week. Wanted to throw out there. I threw kind of a question out there. I don't know if Nani's worth it this week. I don't know what Toronto's defense is going to do, and I like Nani. And then if you watch instant replay like I do, the train wreck of a show that it is now, Nani's come under fire for shoving the ref. He only got a yellow card in the game, but I could definitely see Disco coming back. If you put a forcible shove on a ref, even if you're trying to defuse a situation, that should be a sending off. So I'm not even sure Nani's going to be available. So I'm not going to slot him in right now. I want to kind of see the lineups. But yeah, there's a whole lot to be had here. I don't know where it's going to go, and I like those guys. And then I'm toying with the two Seattle defenders. And so Lewis Morgan's kind of my flip. If I get away from Roldan, I think Lewis Morgan's going to be my next guy in and take a road chance on that one.
You have to remember, if you're going to do anything to a ref, it's to pretend to throw the ball in at them. That's the thing that you do to a referee. No, don't do any of those things. Don't. We are anti-referee abuse on this show. No, those are some good ones. I wasn't sure if I was going to be the only one who would mention Medina, but yeah, I had him as well. I have a Nani alternative already in my team so far. I have Pereira as an option. The only name Ashley gave us for this one was Heel, which I agree. I think that's unanimous for all of us. He was the first one to drop in, especially with New York Red Bulls defense likely being very much so different than it has been in the past with those injuries that they've had. I mentioned already before, Valeri's an interesting one to drop out into the conversation. I don't know. He has not gotten more than 60 minutes. He didn't play. He played less than 10 in the last week. So it's an interesting one to throw out there. Is he going to maybe try to get 75, maybe a 90 this week? I don't know if he's 90 minutes fit anymore. But I did want to throw that out there because Portland is at home and they are going up against LA Galaxy, whose defense is horrid. Their defense is horrid. And so there's part of me that's just screaming, I want someone from Portland, but I don't really want someone from Portland. And so Valeri bounces around. So that's a name I wanted to bring up, mostly to say weigh that option against the other players. I think Morgan's a great shout out. Madron could be one over in Chicago if you want to go with somebody there. He's left wing. He's not their number 10, but he's had some good production. There's a little bit of sharing of points out there, but with Chicago not doing so hot, that's hard to latch on. But there's an option from Chicago if you want to try to jump onto that game. Lille, that's another one I don't think you guys had mentioned. Lille against that,
especially with the right back injuries that Austin has had recently as well. Yeah. That's probably a good shout, Reid.
Yeah.
And a more economical pick given, Carlos Heel has been diamond hands from a price valuation standpoint.
There we go. And I can't not mention Acosta. I've seen him pop up in a couple teams on Discord that I've caught, and he has managed to have some good production when FC Cincinnati has done poorly. I think Montreal will come out on top of that game, but they're not invincible. They're not the best defense in the league, so there could be options for some production from Acosta this week. Again, I would have him as a bench option 100%. Would not be starting in my team. But if you want to do something fun, he, like I said, he has had some points. Maybe he could potentially see a price rise. So if you're trying to get some value, that might be it. Not a lot of expensive players over at FC Cincinnati. He's one of the more expensive ones. I guess he's sub 10, so that might be a little bit too rich for a Cincinnati player. But there's no name to throw out there for people to think about.
Reid, chat gave you your Portland answer. Don't go with Valeri. It's Yimi. Go Yimi Chara for that one. He's been the better scoring and more consistent. I think somebody threw it out there. It was either in Discord or in chat that Valeri's got like 48, 60, and 8 minutes in his last three games.
He's not been playing a lot.
So, like, if he starts, I wouldn't be opposed to running Valeri, but Yimi Chara has been the most consistent midfielder with Blanco out, besides maybe Williamson, who's another name we got to throw out, especially if you're looking at switcheroo options. He's a lot cheaper. Both of those guys get decent points, but I don't think either one of them are nearly the ceiling that Blanco and Valeri have had. But Yimi did get a hat trick in CCL, or 2 goals in CCL. Like when he's on form, he can be a monster.
I wouldn't go Williamson personally on that one, Blayne, just because with how much all of the French Revolution players have had their visa situation cleared, and a couple of them made their debut on Saturday for the LA Galaxy. So I'd imagine it's probably Grandsir on the left, Leggett on the right, and one of those two will probably be the first attacking sub that the LA Galaxy go with, and those wingers have been tucked in really tight. So I think the Galaxy could try to overwhelm things and make life difficult for Williamson. Chara will probably be able to hold his own. On the other hand, the Galaxy still do not have a number 6, and Jonathan Dos Santos doesn't really defend. So I have to imagine Yimi Chara a little bit further up. But I'd echo your point. Yimi's probably the best one to go to. I might look at, I don't have his price off the top, but I think if there's any forward in the game, I'd go with Portland. I think the only one I would consider is Ibobasi, and only if he's starting.
All this just makes me not want a Portland player, which was sort of where I was at the beginning anyway.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't really want Portland. I kind of feel like I wanted, though, because LA's been so bad. But no, all of this has brought me full circle to, no, I don't really want a Portland player. And that's it. Give me a Lille instead of a Portland player. There we go.
Yeah.
Easy right there. Okay, guys, let's move on to forwards. We had a question for me to ask chat, and this is, do you risk Vela with a roll to Rui Diaz or Joseph Martinez? Well, as spoiler alert, I have Vela on my team so far. My answer is yes. I guess that's what it has to be. Yeah, no, I think I would. I rolled the dice on Vela last week and swapped him out when he didn't start. If he does go up against Colorado, which he may not, I know some of the latest reports is that they really want to make sure he is 100%, and they're not going to risk injuring him further. So this could be another time where Vela subs in. But if Vela starts, I think I want Vela, and I would roll that risk because there are plenty of options that you could switch to in that Sunday game. You could easily go to a Rui Diaz. I don't think I'd go to Joseph on the road to Seattle. Just no, I would not do that. The DC Philadelphia game would be a bit more intriguing to me. Maybe go with a Shavilko. That's a name that wasn't included in that list. That could be an interesting thing switch to throw in there. I don't know if I would go with DC with just what I've seen. I don't have any consistency there. But you could look at some options in Nashville as well. So you definitely, I think you have some more options than just a Rui Diaz or a Joseph Martinez. But for me, yeah, I'm totally rolling the dice with Joseph, and I'll go ahead and I guess finish up what I was thinking for this position. I have clicked off of the screen. I have a Vela, then I have a switcheroo up to there. I have Wade here just as a placeholder, and then still sort of undecided about that next forward. Maybe it's a Barrick if you want to go with a Chicago right there. Maybe you want to go with a Polito to see if you can do a road team against San Jose. That might be one of your stronger road options there. Not a lot of forwards that really jump out to me because so many of them are on the road. I mean, you could try to go with Chicharito and see what he can do against Portland, which could be fantastic. But I'm thinking that it's probably going to be for me a Vela and then a slightly cheaper forward and just see what happens. Maybe Polito.
I wouldn't go Vela personally, Reid, just because even if he starts,
because you're from
Saturday
Colorado,
night,
that's why.
Well, I mean, even if he played, what was it, 25 minutes plus stoppage time on the weekend. So I'm not even sure, to your point of just how careful LAFC and Bob Bradley need to be with him. Even if he starts, I'm not convinced that he would go the full 90 minutes. So I have a steadfast rule. I don't start somebody if I'm not confident they're going at least 60 minutes from an attacking standpoint. That's enough time for Vela to do some damage against the Rapids defense. And from a defender's standpoint, that's do they even register enough minutes for the clean sheet? So I wouldn't consider him even if he was starting. I think depending on how they line things up, Rossi might be an option. But if he's not starting, I think Sam Vines is another really good option at fullback, even if the Rapids don't get a clean sheet.
Blayne, who do you like?
Yeah, first name in my list was Boris Johnson for Montreal. first game of the week, throw him on the bench. He's cheap, playing FC Cincinnati. Like I said, I like Cincinnati. I think they're better, but a 5.2 bench forward that got 2 goals in a game last week at 4.7, like, I'm not going to pass up on that option. Definitely worth throwing on your bench, if not starting. It's that first game, so he should be on the bench. And then the next one I went to was Chicharito. Too many goals in such a short span. Ashley said he doesn't have 2 bad seasons in a row. He looks like he's on. I don't trust the Portland defense enough. I think Chicharito's worth taking, regardless of what else happens. And then that last spot's kind of wide open. I like Rui Diaz. I think he's been on fire. Seattle's been on fire. I don't trust the Atlanta defense. So Rui Diaz is kind of my first option. But I'm also looking at 2 defenders, defender and a keeper. Do I have Roldan in the midfield? Like, what do you do? It's going to be so hard. I do think that could be a Vela's position with Rui Diaz playing after. And you've got some later midfield options. Like, if I don't go Morgan, I go Monteiro. Monteiro could easily get dropped for Roldan, who I like better, to get my 3 Seattle players, and then drop Rui Diaz and bring in Vela. There's a lot of fluctuation here given what's going on. Lille is another guy. I would probably take Roldan or João Paulo over Lille this week. But that's only if I don't have Rui Diaz in there. Like, it's kind of all in flux. I don't see much after Vela, but I do kind of like Rui Diaz as my third, but I could definitely throw Vela in there in that spot and free up a third Seattle spot to use somewhere else. So I'm kind of on the fence waiting to see what happens, but those are probably the 4 forwards I'm looking at, with that last one being almost completely dependent on if Vela starts. And if Vela starts, I would probably risk it. Depending, if I see a Boubacar back for Colorado, there's no way I'm playing Vela. I think Colorado's defense is that good, and Vela, on the injury concerns, not knowing how far he's going to go. So I'm trying to go more thought process on this one so everybody can kind of understand how some of us make decisions, and maybe that helps you make a decision down the road too. But yeah, if Boubacar's out and Vela's starting, I'm probably going to try Vela this week. But I have Rui Diaz in my lineup for the simple fact that I don't think Vela's going to go. I think they're going to rest him one more time.
2 of the names that we haven't thrown out yet that are probably good options. We've got Tati over there at New York City, and Bo as well against some of those defenses. But Matt, more for you to add at this position?
Rui Diaz, I'd just say, he had a bunch of really good opportunities, wasn't able to score against San Jose, didn't score against LAFC. This is one of the best strikers on probably the best team in MLS right now. The odds that he doesn't score a goal or an assist in 3 games straight, highly unlikely. So he's a guarantee for me. I hyped this up earlier, but I don't trust the Chicago Fire defense. So give me Higuain as a decent road option. I have third Chicharito. I think if it was different scenario, I'd probably be putting Chicharito before both of those 2 and maybe even captaining him. While I think it's advantageous for him that Portland has a situation at goalkeeper that's going to make him a little bit more aggressive and getting into good spots. I'm not sure how, Chicharito did not play in the 2 games. I don't think he played a single turf game last year with the injuries that he had and everything. So I kind of wonder, first time playing at Portland with the Portland turf, yes, he's a poacher, but then the ball's going to bounce a little bit differently. And so is that going to look a little weird to me? If this was a home game for the LA Galaxy, I'd be starting and captaining Chicharito, but it's that little scenario that just historically the LA Galaxy have had trouble with, especially early on in games, and the Galaxy have been better goal scoring in the first half. The last couple of weeks is the reason that I have him as third, but I'll be starting Rui Diaz and Higuain unless something drastic happens between now and Saturday.
Very fair. All right, I think we've covered that one pretty well. Ashley brought over Shibilko, Rui Diaz, and Tati. That's where the Tati name came from. And Shibilko, I think she said is 6.9. I didn't double check that. Switcheroo options. Matt, king of switcheroos. You got to give us what you think.
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned earlier, definitely the Philly defender options I might have there in there. Given that they're at the end, I might have them more for a actual switcheroo rather than an auto route. If you're looking at auto route options, I think Blayne and I have said enough that there's one good option that you could have at various positions in the Montreal-Cincinnati game in the attack for both teams. I think it comes down to what positions you're light on that you actually have on your bench, and also how much money that you have. I like Mason Toye as opposed to Johnson personally, but he is a little bit more expensive. He's 6.4, so it'll probably come down to a budget situation, and maybe if there's a surprise in terms of the lineup. But I think Montreal in the attack, Philly in the defense, both really good options this week.
Blayne.
Yeah, Boris Johnson was my first one. Matt, to your point, I don't know that Toye has been starting with Johnson playing.
He's not.
So I think it's one or the other. I think if you want to go this game, and I would almost say that Toye and Johnson are a must-own this week, whichever one does start. Cincinnati's defense, while I try to give them credit with Acosta being there, I just don't trust the defense enough to say you can't do this, that you can't skip this position. I think you have to have one of the Montreal guys on the bench. And that leads me to my second switcheroo, which is Mihailovic. I think between Toye, Johnson, and Mihailovic, you have to have one of those on your bench because it is the first game of the week. It is FC Cincinnati. If they give up 3 or 4 goals, which I'm not counting on, but if that happens, you don't want to be without some coverage in Montreal. Or, yeah, Bjorn, not Boris, whatever. Chat just corrected me. I'm all the way off on this one. But, yeah, Johnson's your big name. And then I like Stojanovic again for Chicago. He's kind of faded off. He's taken a couple of price drops. But, again, it's Miami. Chicago's at home. Chicago always plays better at home. Just watch for him to start. He hasn't started the last couple of games, or at least the last game. But if Stojanovic is out there, I think he's a prime switcheroo candidate. And then I don't normally switcheroo my defenders. I don't put defenders on the bench. I tend to pick 3 and stick with them and try to get more points for my attacking players. I just seem to have better luck with that. But I think this is the week with all the clean sheet teams I put out there that you could throw a clean sheet defender early in the week on the bench and switch to a different team if they don't hit. Normally, I don't do that with defenders just because I haven't been identifying that many clean sheet teams that I like to switch to. And if you're going to spend on guys like I do for bonus points at times, you're not going to want to put the money into a Hollingshead or a buy for your bench and then have to go switch to another defender that costs more. You might as well just take your chances with the bonus points and leave them in there. But I think this week, with all the potential clean sheets and with how easily they can be busted, you may look at a couple more clean sheet defenders rather than attacking players in this position.
I mean, if you're going to mention the FC Cincinnati defense, we have to at least say that Jeff Cameron has signed with FC Cincinnati. Grandpa Cameron will be coming back to MLS to play, so I throw that out there for whatever he becomes available.
I saw like a gaff counter or something similar for Cameron already because he played. Like, he signed and played in his first week. Like, that's pretty amazing. We normally have a couple-week layoff when a guy signs, but no, he signed and played, and I don't think he did very well, all things considered.
I mean, we'll see, but yeah,
I'm not seeing him in fantasy right now, guys.
No, I don't think he's in the game at this time, but yeah, no, he's newest addition to Cincinnati. We'll see what happens with that. And finally, let's wrap up with captains. Blayne, who are you looking at?
Carlos Heel or bust this week. Best midfielder in the game currently. I won't disrespect Pozuelo and Ladero, but they're not playing right now. So I think Carlos Heel is a top 3 midfielder in MLS, and he's the only one playing right now. So I don't think you can bet against him at home. My other candidates that I like, given their matchups, are all road players. So yeah, it's Carlos Heel all the way.
Matt?
Shea, just kidding. So I guess I've got a flow chart process to dealing with this. I love Carlos Heel if it ends up that he's playing centrally. If he's on the wing, I might think about it. If that happens and I don't go with Heel as captain, I'll go with Atuesta assuming Vela starts. And then if that doesn't happen, then it'll just be take my pick in terms of what things look like for Seattle. It could be Rui Diaz. It could be one of the wing backs that we've talked about previously. It'll probably come down to me depending on how Atlanta ends up setting up and everything. But I have a very flowcharty. It'll probably just end up being heel anyways.
Matt, but Ashley has your answer, and she gave it to Reid.
That's right. Ashley says Brad Smith is her captain.
Okay, so Brad Smith, our Mr. Fantasy Lord and Savior, of course.
There we go. I cannot caution more strong on this show of the risk you take if you captain a defender. It definitely works. There are times when defenders get amazing scores, but it is such an incredible risk to tap in a defender. But if you want to do that and you have fun doing it, more power to you. Have at it. I'm captaining Carlos Heel, and I agree with Chet that he is by far the runaway captain, first choice captain this week. So if you captain Heel and he does not do well, do not worry. Many other people will do that, and you can hedge your bets going with Heel, or you can be crazy and captain Brad Smith or Breck Shea. So top three right there. Top three captain choices right there. No, it's got to be Heel. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight, and for Matt for putting up with his technical difficulties at the beginning of the show to join us with a triumphant return. Let's do the plugs. Matt, you have so much to plug. What do you want to share with us tonight?
If you want to get at me on Twitter to talk MLS Fantasy or complain when you went with something I said this week and it absolutely goes pear-shaped, at LWS Matt Pollard. For all of my written content at Last Word, head on over to Last Word on Sports /soccer. Lots of rapid stuff, some LA Galaxy, and then a smattering of other MLS things. And then obviously from a Rapids podcast standpoint, which I've talked to Rabbi this week, Reid, and he has agreed we're going to start to open that door a little bit. We're going to depressure the can on MLS Fantasy because apparently there's a bunch of listeners who want to know, and half of it is because people have been starting and captaining Eunice Nomley, and that has not worked out this season for the Rapids or for those fantasy owners. So Rapids Twitter needs some MLS Fantasy help. I am here for that, and you are here for that as well. So if you want to get at that, folks, at Rapids96 Podcast on Twitter, and then of course search Rapids Podcast or Holding the High Line on wherever you get your podcast to find that for me and Rabbi to talk all things Rapids and gradually talk Rapids in a fantasy context.
And if you want to put pressure, you can also tell them that they could have an awesome guest from the MLS Fantasy Insider like myself or Blayne or Ashley join them sometime, depending on whose time zone is more friendly. Which
we're working on it, Reid. It's in the works.
Mine is probably the least friendly to do something like that. Blayne, what do you want to plug?
Just the Discord community. I mean, it's been fun this year. They've been a huge help with the injury updates. I know I'm kind of the injury guy right now, but I'm not the injury guy. Discord's the injury team. We've got a whole group of people updating it. There's just a handful of guys that have edit permissions on that sheet, and they get the work done every week for us. I help out with it when I can, but they've just done such a good job, and the whole injury thing is it's all on them. It's a community project. I don't want to take credit for it because it is so community driven, and we've got so much help. And the set piece takers thing is updating every week too. We're getting a better handle on that, and it's just a huge project to try to undertake, and it's so refreshing to know that when I've had work the last couple of weeks, the Discord community's been on it and it's gotten updated and the resource is accurate, even when I'm not in charge of it all the time. And so, yeah, the Discord community is just there. Go join it if you haven't. Tell your friends, tell anybody you know that plays fantasy to go get on that Discord community because there's all sorts of fun chat going on. Most of it's fantasy, but there's some other stuff that gets thrown in there. We talk about the referees and talk about different stuff. It's a good time and a good place, a good community to be part of.
And of course, for myself, head over to MLSFantasyBoss.com for the articles that we put out during the week. One of the most popular new articles we have is the Discord community player rankings, which has been really fun to get the weekly poll. You must be a member of the Discord community to join that. So again, MLSFantasyBoss.com/Discord to find out how to join. It's easy, it's free, and it's one of the, if not the best fantasy community online right now. You can also have updates over at r/fantasymls. The rant thread is there, and just some general news gets posted. And of course, follow and subscribe to this podcast to help the numbers there, and at MLS Fantasy Insider or at MLSFI and at MLS Fantasy Boss on Twitter if you want to follow and interact online. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It's been a blast, and as always, good luck.
Shake.
You guys are crazy. You're crazy.
You know what you signed up for when you